The courtroom carried a suffocating weight, the kind that pressed down on your chest and refused to let go. Every shuffle of a chair, every faint cough, every pen tapping against the desk sounded like a drum in the charged silence. Diddy sat stiff at the defense table, jaw clenched, eyes fixed ahead as if bracing for an oncoming storm. The air itself felt heavier, colder, as though even the walls knew history was about to be written. Flashes from cameras bounced across polished wood, each click capturing the downfall of a man once untouchable. Whispers swirled through the gallery, a mix of gossip, speculation, and shock, all aimed at the figure sitting in the hot seat of his life. Then, the massive wooden doors creaked open, and all noise was swallowed whole. The judge entered, robes flowing, expression unreadable but sharp enough to slice through steel. Diddy's lawyer stiffened, tugging at his tie, throwing a side glance toward his client as if to say, "Stay calm. We'll get through this." The bailiff's voice boomed, ordering the court to rise, and the synchronized motion of bodies stood as an unspoken signal. This was no ordinary hearing. The judge's gaze swept over the room, pausing ever so briefly on Diddy, and that split-second glance was enough to send shivers crawling down spines. Before we dive any further into this chilling courtroom drama, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and smash the notification bell so you never miss a story this explosive. Now, let's get back to it. As the judge settled into the bench, the faint creak of wood echoed like a warning, and the gavel sat untouched but threatening, a silent reminder of absolute power. Diddy's fingers interlocked tightly, knuckles paling as if he could hold his future together with sheer force. Across from him, the prosecutor leaned back in their chair, arms crossed, eyes glinting like a predator waiting for the perfect strike. The air shifted when Diddy's lawyer finally stood, adjusting his jacket with deliberate precision, every move demanding respect. His voice rolled out calm but laced with urgency, slicing through the tension with carefully chosen words. He painted Diddy not as a monster headlines had condemned, but as a flawed man, broken, scarred, yet ready to stand accountable. His speech landed like a lifeline cast into stormy seas, each phrase pulling Hope closer, daring the judge to see beyond the scandal. Diddy's eyes tracked his lawyer's every gesture, as though salvation itself lay in those hands. But the prosecutor sat motionless, expression unreadable, calculating their counterattack. Somewhere in the gallery, a pen scratched furiously against paper, the sound slicing through the heavy silence like an unseen whisper. The judge leaned forward, resting her chin against her hand, fingers drumming on the bench in a slow, steady rhythm that echoed like a countdown in every heart. Each tap said more than words ever could. "I hold the power here." Diddy shifted, jaw tight, sweat beginning to beat along his temple as the reality of the stakes pressed down harder. The room itself felt like it teetered on the blade of a knife. One wrong move, and everything would shatter. He barely dared to blink, terrified that even the smallest movement could fracture the fragile momentum his defense was clinging to. His lawyer's tone softened, almost pleading now, as he spoke of redemption, of second chances, of the man Diddy might still become if only given the chance. But across the courtroom, the prosecutor reached for a file, no ordinary file, but one thick with sealed photos, classified documents, and evidence hidden from the public eye. Its presence alone made the air turn colder, a chill running through the gallery like oxygen had been sucked from the room. Diddy's eyes flicked toward it for a split second, and that flicker of dread was impossible to ignore. The gallery felt it too. A sudden hush swept through the audience, the kind that sends shivers down your skin because everyone knows a storm is about to break. Rising slowly, almost theatrically, the prosecutor held the file in one hand while pulling a single sheet free with the other. The faint rustle of paper sounded like thunder in the silence. Diddy's lawyer froze mid-sentence, his eyes narrowing as if bracing for impact. The judge's fingers, once tapping idly, stopped altogether, her stillness sharper than any spoken word. The prosecutor's voice finally broke the silence, low and deliberate, each word hitting like a slow drip echoing endlessly in a cavern. They weren't just reciting charges anymore. They were weaving a narrative, a timeline of events strung together with deadly precision. And in that timeline lay connections no one had pieced together before. Diddy stiffened, shoulders drawing tight as if he could physically shrink from the truth looming over him. Flashes from the press row captured every tremor of emotion, every crack in the composure he fought to hold. His lawyer whispered under his breath, maybe a warning, maybe a desperate plea, but Diddy didn't move, didn't answer. His eyes were locked on that paper as if it already carried the verdict carved into stone. The prosecutor slid the sheet onto the evidence screen, and as it lit up, a ripple of gasps surged through the courtroom. The image wasn't crisp, but it was clear enough. This wasn't just paperwork. It was a ghost from the past, a forgotten incident barely reported at the time, but now resurfacing with the weight of dynamite. The kind of revelation that could turn a jury's heart to stone in seconds. For the first time, Diddy's lawyer faltered. His face paled, his polished confidence cracking as he tried to object. But the judge raised a hand ever so slightly, silencing him without a word. The silence was suffocating, and the weight of the evidence hung like a blade above the defense. The defense lawyer scrambled, his voice sharp and urgent now, objecting again before the prosecutor could press forward. But the judge didn't flinch. Without lifting her gaze, she delivered a single word, over, with such calm authority that it cut the objection in half. The blow wasn't physical, but it landed with devastating force. You could feel the energy shift instantly, the jury's attention snapping back to the prosecutor like iron drawn to a magnet. Momentum was gone, control had flipped, and everyone in the room knew it. Diddy's defense wasn't just stumbling, it was unraveling. The prosecutor didn't hurry. They moved with the cold patience of someone holding the winning card, savoring every second before slamming it down. From the evidence table came another file. Not as thick, but somehow even more dangerous. The kind of file that didn't need bulk to devastate. Just a few pages, a handful of words, could dismantle years of legal shielding. Diddy's lawyer tried a softer angle this time, urging the court to dismiss the file as irrelevant. But the words fell flat, lacking conviction, as if even he knew the fight was slipping through his fingers. The judge's brief glance was all it took, permission granted, and the prosecutor was free to proceed. That moment sealed it. Permission granted, and the mask finally slipped. The prosecutor strode toward the jury box, holding a photograph tight in their hand. They didn't show it to the public right away, only the jurors. The sound that followed wasn't staged. It was raw, involuntary gasps, sharp enough to slice through the silence. Whatever those eyes had just seen wasn't merely harmful. It was catastrophic. When the image finally hit the courtroom screen, the truth unfolded in brutal clarity. A younger Diddy, surrounded by faces the trial had not yet dared to name. But this wasn't some casual snapshot. Behind him was a location no one in the room could mistake, a setting tied to one of the darkest chapters of the case. The link was undeniable, searing itself into the jury's minds. Diddy's head dropped ever so slightly, his lips pressing into a grim line. His lawyer leaned in, whispering urgently, but there was no reaction. Silence radiated from the defense table, and it was louder than any objection could ever be. Calm but cutting, the prosecutor narrated the photo's origins, its date, the faces, the implications, each fact stacking like bricks, walling Diddy deeper into the corner. The judge leaned back, her gaze locked on Diddy as though silently measuring him, weighing something unspoken. The tension wasn't just about evidence anymore. It was about inevitability. His lawyer's grip tightened on the edge of the defense table, knuckles paling under the pressure. His voice, slower and heavier, tried to drag the jury's eyes away from the damning image still glowing on the screen. Ladies and gentlemen, context matters. What you're seeing is a fragment, not the full story. But the words cracked, brittle, spoken less like persuasion and more like delay. The prosecutor didn't give him the chance. Context. They snapped, pacing closer to the jurors. We'll give you context. They raised another document, a sworn statement, signed by a name already infamous within the case. They didn't need to shout. Each word cut clean, every sentence stitching the threads tighter. Meetings, dates, connections, the kind of details jurors never forget. Diddy stared at the table, shoulders rigid, his eyes fixed downward as the weight of the words closed in. The room seemed alive with tension, crawling over the walls, pressing on every chest. Then came the blow that cracked the air wide open. Two images lit the display. One the infamous younger Diddy photo, the other a police surveillance still from a date the defense had sworn was unrelated. The backgrounds matched. The timestamps aligned. It wasn't just similar. It was damning. Diddy's lawyer sprang from his chair, moving quickly toward the screen as if his presence alone could shield it. Your Honor, this is prejudicial, but the judge's reply was calm, cutting, final. Sit down, counsel. The jury will decide relevance. The gasp that followed didn't come from the public benches. It came from the defense table itself. Even the most seasoned court watchers knew the weight of that moment. A judge openly dismissing an objection like that wasn't just a ruling, it was a warning. The tide had turned, and not in their favor. The prosecutor let the silence breathe, each second magnifying the shift in power, before finally speaking. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been patient. You've listened. And now, you're beginning to see the truth. Each word felt deliberate, carved into memory like stone. Then came the dagger. For the first time that day, the prosecutor turned to face Diddy directly. Mr. Combs, you've claimed ignorance. But explain this. A third photograph appeared, grainy but unmistakable. Diddy at a private gathering, surrounded by individuals already convicted in related cases. His lawyer flinched, visibly rattled. This image wasn't supposed to exist in the record. The judge leaned forward, eyes narrowing, as if considering whether this crossed a dangerous line. No objection came. Not yet. Just a heavy silence of defense cracking under pressure. Finally, the lawyer stood, his voice thin with forced calm. Your Honor, this image carries no confirmed date. But he was cut off mid-sentence. The date is in the metadata, counselor, and you know it. The prosecutor's tone sliced clean, and already a tech specialist approached with a printed report. At the top, bold and undeniable, the timestamp glared for all to see. Gasps rippled across the gallery, not just at the evidence itself, but at the defense's unraveling under its weight. Diddy's fingers tapped nervously against the table, a staccato rhythm betraying nerves his face couldn't hide. The judge's voice cut through, firm and commanding. This court will allow the jury to review the photograph alongside the metadata. The decision landed like a hammer blow, and the silence that followed carried the weight of inevitability. The walls themselves seemed to close in tighter, the case no longer about speculation or strategy. This was evidence, hard and cold. And for the first time, even the strongest offense couldn't stop the ground from sliding out beneath Diddy's feet. The objection is overruled. The words cut clean, quiet but final. The prosecutor's shoulders lifted slightly, an exhale of satisfaction slipping through. The juror's eyes flickered between the photo, the metadata report, and the defendant himself. In that instant, it felt like the scales had tilted, inching closer to an unavoidable end. The defense lawyer rifled through his papers without focus, unable to meet his client's stare. He had vowed to dismantle the prosecution, yet piece by piece it was his own strategy falling apart in full view of the nation. The atmosphere grew heavier, suffocating even, every breath inside the courtroom sharp and weighted. All eyes locked on Diddy, but his gaze was lost, fixed far beyond the walls, as though he saw not the present but the consequences racing toward him. His lawyer leaned close, whispering frantic words, but Diddy barely moved, barely nodded. Across the aisle, the prosecutors stacked their files with deliberate precision, savoring every second. It was no longer about evidence alone. This was psychological warfare, and the defense was being crushed without a single word spoken. The judge adjusted their glasses, flipping through notes. The soft crackle of paper sounded louder than thunder, each turn another nail in the coffin, each page another step toward the edge. And then, it happened. The prosecutor rose again, holding an envelope so plain it might have been overlooked. Yet even at a glance, the defense stiffened. They knew. Whatever was inside wasn't scheduled, wasn't expected. The defense lawyer's hand shot up in protest. Your Honor, but the judge didn't stop the move. Calm, commanding, they allowed it. You may proceed. The envelope slid open slowly, deliberately, like a ritual. Out came several sheets of worn paper, the edges frayed from countless hands. Silence pressed against the room, the gallery leaning forward instinctively, as though gravity itself was pulling them closer. The prosecutor let the moment stretch until it nearly snapped, then spoke, voice low, steady, but carrying the weight of a hammer. These, they said, are statements from individuals who claim they were silenced, paid to vanish, paid by this man. The words didn't just land. They detonated. Diddy's jaw tightened, but his lips remained sealed. His lawyer sprang up, but the judge's raised hand stopped him cold. The papers were placed on the evidence table with a finality that made the gallery stir. The jury's eyes darted from the pages to Diddy, back again, hunting for a crack, a tell, anything. And in that exchange of glances, everyone felt it. This case had crossed a line. The point of no return had arrived. The prosecutor's words clung to the air like smoke, seeping into every corner, impossible to escape. Diddy sat tall, shoulders squared, but his body betrayed him. A locked jaw, a twitch in the fingers drumming faintly against polished wood. Signs of a man cornered. The judge skimmed the pages, brows furrowing deeper with every line. Silence thickened, the balance of the trial visibly shifting. The defense lawyer rose again, his voice edged sharp with desperation. "Your Honor, these statements are unverified, inadmissible." But the judge's eyes didn't move to him. They stayed fixed on Diddy, reading him, not just as a defendant, but as a man whose past was unraveling in real time. The gavel hadn't fallen, but judgment was already in the air. The prosecutor stepped closer to the jury, the statements held high like a blade poised to strike. "These accounts," they said, slow and deliberate, "aren't from strangers. They are from people this man once called friends, employees, family." Each word hit harder than the last, chiseling itself into the jury's minds. And for the first time, it wasn't just evidence being weighed. It was loyalty, betrayal, and the undeniable collapse of an empire. The last word hit like thunder. A sharp gasp broke from the gallery. One juror's lips parted in shock, a crack in composure no defense attorney ever wants to see. Diddy leaned into his lawyer, whispering something desperate, less strategy and more prayer. But before counsel could respond, the judge lifted a hand. The courtroom froze. Their voice came low but heavy, each word pressing down like stone. "Enough!" The declaration cut through the tension, rearranging the very air. The judge's gaze bore into Diddy, unflinching. They ordered the bailiff to collect the evidence, making it clear this wasn't a moment to argue, but the moment that would decide everything. And with that, the room knew this was no longer a battle. This was the endgame. The silence stretched so thick you could hear the hum of the ceiling lights. Slowly, deliberately, the judge leaned forward, both hands gripping the bench. "Mr. Combs," they said, voice carrying the weight of a verdict not yet spoken, but already felt. "You will remember this day for the rest of your life." The gavel cracked against the wood, sharp, final, echoing like a prison door slamming shut. Diddy's head dropped, his shoulders trembling, not in rage this time, but under the crushing gravity of truth. His lawyer's hand rested on his arm, but it was pointless. Words were useless now. Strategy had dissolved into silence. Around him, the gallery shifted. Spectators whispered in disbelief, some shaking their heads, others staring wide-eyed as if history itself had unfolded before them. The prosecutor closed their files with a calm satisfaction, while the bailiff stepped in closer, ready to escort Diddy away. For the first time, the man who once commanded arenas, headlines, and empires looked small. He turned toward the crowd, searching, maybe for a friendly face, maybe for a lifeline, but found only stays. Some pitied, some judged, some smiled faintly at the spectacle of justice catching up. The judge rose and exited through the side door, robe swaying like the curtain at the end of a tragedy. They didn't look back. They didn't need to. Their words still rang through the chamber, etched into stone, etched into memory. And as the heavy doors closed, one truth remained. Whatever came after, this day would mark the moment Diddy's empire crumbled.